Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. South Korea has unveiled a tax reform plan aimed at curbing house prices. The government says it will promote tax fairness by expanding tax benefits for owner-occupied homes, particularly for middle-class households, while imposing a heavier tax burden on higher-value properties. A record-breaking heat wave is now spreading into the western part of South Korea, including the capital region. The Greater Seoul area is now under the country's first-ever severe heat emergency warning, with temperatures in some districts expected to reach 39 degrees Celsius today. U.S. President Donald Trump says Iran faces its last chance to reach a nuclear deal, saying talks with Tehran are underway. But Iran insists it is not negotiating with Washington. We begin this morning with the South Korean government rolling out a sweeping tax reform package centered on revising the comprehensive real estate tax to promote tax fairness. Our Kim Bo-kyung has the details.
With Seoul apartment prices posting their sharpest first-half gain in 18 years, despite tough government regulations, the administration has unveiled a tax reform plan targeting property owners. One of the major reforms raises the basic tax deduction for owner-occupied single homes to 1.4 billion won, while lowering it to 900 million won if the owner does not reside in the property. The move is designed to ease the financial burden on primary residents while normalizing taxes for non-occupiers. The government will also overhaul the comprehensive real estate tax system, shifting from a home count model to one based strictly on property value. Differentiated tax rates for multiple homeowners will be phased out by 2028. However, tax rates for properties valued between 600 million and 1.2 billion won will rise starting next year.
Our primary goal in rationalizing the real estate tax system is to ensure fairness. That means offering greater tax benefits for owner-occupied homes, particularly for middle-class households, while ensuring an appropriate tax burden on higher-value properties.
Under existing rules, residents earning capital gains were eligible for an annual basic deduction of 2.5 million won. Under the new plan, the basic capital gains deduction will increase tenfold, from 2.5 million to 25 million won, for single homeowners who have lived in their property for over 10 years, aiming to reduce the tax burden on long-term residents. Multiple property owners selling homes in regulated areas previously faced heavy capital gains tax surcharges. To encourage owners to bring properties to market, the government will temporarily ease these surcharges during a targeted window through 2027 and 2028.
Considering the normalization of property holding taxes, the government will temporarily extend capital gains tax relief for multi-homeowners through 2028, giving those who wish to sell a viable opportunity to bring their properties to market.
Despite such tax reforms to curb house prices, one expert says property owners are not going to sell as the price keeps going higher.
Even with higher taxes, many homeowners will likely hold onto their properties due to strong expectations of future price growth. Because physical land for new housing is limited in Seoul and the capital region, expanding urban redevelopment and reconstruction is essential to truly stabilizing prices.
Meanwhile, the tax reform package also includes expanded tax credits for monthly rent payments to ease housing costs for working-class households, while directing more fiscal incentives toward non-metropolitan regions to foster balanced local growth. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Over at the National Assembly, the future role of prosecutors in South Korea is at the center of a growing political and legal debate. As a landmark reform heads toward final government approval, both supporters and opponents are making their final case. Our correspondent Moon Ye-ryun reports.
Korea's ruling and opposition parties remain sharply divided over a sweeping overhaul of the role of prosecutors in the criminal investigation system, with the cabinet set to take up the bill on Tuesday before it becomes law. The amendment passed by the National Assembly on July 31st strips prosecutors of their power to investigate cases directly or order police to carry out further investigations. In their place, the law enshrines a clear split between investigation and prosecution, while requiring police and prosecutors to cooperate at every stage of a case. The Democratic Party defended the legislation during a public briefing at the National Assembly on Monday, arguing that it strengthens victim protections and clarifies investigative procedures. Acting party chairman Han Byung-do described the bill as the next essential stage of judicial reform.
The revision is not the end of prosecution reform, but the beginning of a criminal justice system centered on the people. It marks a historic institutional change by ending a prosecutor-centered system and separating investigative and prosecutorial powers.
Meanwhile, the main opposition, People Power Party, renewed its call for President Lee Jae-myung to veto the bill ahead of the cabinet meeting, while also preparing a constitutional challenge. Party chairman Chang Dong-hyuk warned the legislation would undermine the country's long-standing judicial framework.
A judicial system maintained for 78 years has been dismantled overnight. Rebuilding it will take enormous time, or it may prove impossible to restore properly.
Meanwhile, National Office of Investigation Commissioner Hong Seok-ki said police would work to improve the completeness of investigations before referring cases to prosecutors, expressing confidence that closer consultation between the two agencies would reduce the need for additional investigations under the revised system. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Tensions continue to escalate in the Middle East as U.S. President Donald Trump says Iran faces its last chance to reach a nuclear deal, while Tehran insists it is not negotiating with Washington. Our Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
U.S. President Donald Trump says that talks with Iran are underway. Trump, speaking at the Oval Office on Monday, escalated the pressure by saying this was Iran's last chance before decapitation, signaling that the U.S. could still launch the large-scale strikes on Iran. Trump, who recently held off with an order to American forces to carry out strikes at the request of Gulf allies Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, added that he hopes Iran will come to its senses to grab one last chance to strike a deal.
Now, we've already, through lots of large attacks, but they were normal large. Hopefully they'll come to their senses, because what happened cannot have a nuclear weapon, but hopefully they'll come to their senses.
Trump added that the first phase of negotiations will be opening the Strait of Hormuz, which will be followed by addressing U.S. concerns over Iran's nuclear program, which will take a little while. He underlined that Washington will not allow Iran to charge commercial vessel transit fees for passing through the strait.
And no, there's not going to be charging. We're not talking about charging at all. There won't be charging.
This comes after Iran said it was not negotiating with the U.S. and had no plans to do so. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghai said at a briefing Monday local time that Iran and Oman were currently negotiating an agreement on a safe transit route for vessels passing through the Strait of Hormuz. He stressed that the talks are a matter between Iran and Oman, that there is no role for the U.S. to play in the negotiations. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
And now for more on the situation in the Middle East, we're joined today by Matthew David Jenkins, Associate Professor at the Department of Political Science at Gyeongsang National University. Professor Jenkins, thanks for coming on today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, despite Trump saying negotiations will resume on Monday and threatening that these new talks are Iran's last chance to make a deal, there's no indication that any new talks have been scheduled. So how do you think the negotiations will play out?
Yeah, so I think what we're going to see is more of indirect negotiations, right? You're not going to see a lot of direct, sit-downs with Iran probably in the near future, as Iran has already stated, has no intention of talking with the United States. But that doesn't mean that they're not negotiating, right? Oman is a trusted partner for both countries, and it's certainly possible that there could be, non-visible negotiations going on through Oman, and I suspect that's what's happening at the moment, right? How's the negotiations going to play out? Again, I don't really see a big settlement on the horizon. That seems unlikely at this point, given that the differences in what the two standpoints of the two countries are in terms of what's actually happening, right? With America saying, "Yeah, we're gonna, talks are imminent, right? We're going through talks right now," and Iran saying that no, and nothing's happening. So that's a pretty big gap. And so we'll see what happens with this Oman agreement, and we'll see what comes out of that. But as of right now, I don't expect anything to change much, in terms of the big picture.
Right, and Trump also said he's calling off a planned attack on Iran. Some reports suggest the United States is running low on weapons. What's really behind the decision?
It's probably multiple things. I don't see any credible evidence that the U.S. is actually running out of weapons. It's true that we're supplying weapons. We've been supplying weapons to the Ukraine for years now, and also to giving military support to Israel. And so, I mean, there are some strains on the weapons supply, but I don't think the United States is actually out of weapons. Massive, major stockpiles of all sorts of weapons, Patriot missiles and offensive missiles and things like that. So I think it's really more about just resource management, right? On the one hand, if the United States is going to continue to pursue its aggressive stance towards Iran, it's going to need weapons. At the same time, it's not like the other potential conflict areas have disappeared, right? China is still there. North Korea is still there. There are still a number of places where you want to have contingency plans put in place. You want to have weapons available in those areas too, should another conflict arise, right? And so I think it's more about just strategic management rather than a weapons stockpile issue.
I see. And Saudi state media said the country's crown prince pushed for de-escalation during a call with Trump. Earlier in the conflict, Saudi Arabia reportedly urged the United States to ramp up attacks on Iran. So why is it now urging both sides to find an end to the conflict?
Yeah, so Saudi Arabia has multiple motivations, multiple interests, right? It's true that Saudi Arabia is not really best friends with Iran. It certainly would like to see Iran's offensive capabilities weakened. It would like to see its military weakened. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard would like to see that weakened. And to a large extent, to a certain extent, that has been achieved, right? The U.S. did weaken Iran's defenses. It weakened its military. Already decapitated, right, the head of the Islamic Republic. I think from Saudi Arabia's perspective, they would at this point, I think they're pretty happy with what has been achieved, and they would like to prevent the broadening of the war, right? As the closing of the Strait of Hormuz is obviously affecting Saudi Arabia directly too. So it's not. Would like to see this conflict resolved, and certainly would not welcome a widening of the war, right? And so I think that's kind of where it sits right at this point.
Right, and like you mentioned, Iran's only negotiations are with Oman, and Tehran says the negotiations on the Strait of Hormuz are entering their final stages. So what role is Oman actually playing in mediating this conflict?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, Oman is kind of playing a Switzerland type role. It's sort of a neutral intermediary. So it is playing a very important role in the negotiations, even if it's not always visible to the public, right? There are back channels, right? There are Oman does serve as a sort of a indirect intermediary between the two countries, and so the United States can. If it has an idea for a compromise or has an idea for some kind of proposal, it can pass that to Oman and then sort of test the waters to see if it's feasible, right, in their perspective, and the same thing for the Iranian side. And of course, the Strait of Hormuz, the waters there are bordered by the two. They're mostly Iran's territorial waters and also Oman. So those are the two countries that are most directly implicated. So yeah, I think it's going to be play a very important role in terms of what the actual, is it really at the final stages? I mean, who knows, right? It's impossible really to tell. Suppose they do reach an agreement, that will not, that would be a more limited agreement about logistical things like shipping lanes and stuff like this, and whether there would be some kind of whether Iran would actually control the passage of ships to the strait. Like as Trump mentioned earlier, is it going to be a fee? Like who's going to be actually control of that? I mean, that's it's impossible for that to get settled when they're still at war with the United States, right? So it's unclear exactly how much of an impact that deal could have if it's really just between Oman and Iran. So I don't see that bringing a major resolution to the conflict in the meantime and in the near-term future either. So that we'll have to see how the U.S. responds to a deal if it is reached.
I see. I guess we'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Jenkins, thank you so much for coming on today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Consumer price inflation has dropped back to the 2% range for the first time in 3 months. According to the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Tuesday, the Consumer Price Index, which has stayed in the 3% range in May and June, slowed to 2.8% year-on-year in July. Petroleum product prices rose 15.5% last month, cooling down from a nearly 25% increase in June. Officials said that this slowing down was driven by falling global oil prices and the government's continued implementation of the oil price cap policy. Meanwhile, former U.S. envoy for North Korean human rights is calling on Washington to reconsider its long-running ban on Americans traveling to North Korea. In an article published by the Korea Economic Institute of America, Robert King, who served as special envoy from 2009 to 2027, said the United States has renewed the travel ban every year without publicly evaluating whether it has achieved its goals. While acknowledging the risks for inexperienced travelers, King argued that the ban has also prevented American humanitarian organizations from delivering aid to North Korea, despite their experience working with North Korean officials. The U.S. imposed a travel ban in 2017 after the death of American college student Otto Warmbier, who died shortly after being released from North Korean detention. Korea's Taekwondo Promotion Foundation has released a new promotional video highlighting the global value of Taekwondo as part of its ongoing campaign to secure UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage status. The 2.5-minute video showcases how practitioners around the world train and connect with communities. It weaves together Taekwondo's deep philosophy and vibrant community culture with sports tourism and K-culture. Co-produced by the Taekwondo Promotion Foundation and Arirang TV, the project was supported by the Ministry of Culture and the Korea Sports Promotion Foundation. You can watch the video on social media and right here on Arirang TV's various channels. South Korea's record-breaking heat wave is now spreading into the western part of the country, prompting authorities to issue the nation's first-ever severe heat emergency warning for parts of the Seoul metropolitan area. As temperatures continue to soar and heat-related illnesses and deaths rise, officials are now urging the public to take extra precautions against the prolonged extreme heat. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Extreme heat has now spread to western parts of the country, including the greater Seoul area, as dangerous temperatures grip much of South Korea. On Monday, daytime highs topped 41 degrees Celsius in Goryeo and Gwangyang in the south. Seoul's Guro-gu district reached 39 degrees, while parts of the Jeolla provinces climbed to around 38 degrees. Meteorologists say the blistering conditions are being driven by a shift in wind direction, with easterly winds now pushing hot, dry air into western Korea. The extreme heat is expected to continue Tuesday, with Seoul, Gwangju, and Daejeon all forecast to reach around 37 degrees Celsius. Authorities are also expanding and strengthening heat alerts. Most of the country remains under heat advisories or warnings, while southern Seoul and parts of Gyeonggi-do province are set to come under the nation's first ever severe heat emergency warning beginning at 11 a.m. Tuesday. Forecasters say the heat wave will only intensify and is expected to persist throughout the week. Seoul is forecast to remain near 37 degrees through Friday, while overnight lows will stay above 25 degrees, bringing several more nights of tropical heat. The prolonged hot weather is also taking a growing toll on public health. According to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, 108 people were treated in emergency rooms for heat-related illnesses on Sunday alone, bringing the nationwide total since May 15th to 2,025. The country has also recorded 16 heat-related deaths so far this season. In Seoul, 18 people were taken to emergency rooms with heat-related illnesses on Sunday, raising the capital's cumulative total to 185 since mid-May. Health officials are urging residents to avoid strenuous outdoor activities during the hottest part of the day, stay in the shade whenever possible, and drink plenty of water to reduce the risk of heat-related illness. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. Russian officials say a Ukrainian drone came down on a crowded beach on the Black Sea coast, killing 7 people. 3 of them were children. The drone hit near the village of Archipo-Osipovka on Sunday at the height of the holiday season. It dropped toward the shoreline before erupting into a fireball. As well as the 7 deaths, 40 people were hurt, and 17 of those were hospitalized. Krasnodar's governor called it a, quote, deliberate strike on civilians. Ukraine has not responded. Both sides deny they target civilians, and it is not yet clear what the drone was aiming at. Romania has blown up a rocky outcrop on the Danube River to steer more water towards its only working nuclear reactor. This comes as the drought in Eastern Europe has left river water levels too low to cool the nuclear plant. The controlled blast on Monday threw up a tower of water and rubble, clearing ground for a temporary dam to redirect water to the reactor. Romania had already shut one of its 2 nuclear plants last week. Upstream in Hungary, the Pax nuclear plant is down to just over 10% of capacity after the Danube hit a record low water level. Eastern European countries are looking to conserve energy, and 2 car makers have paused their Romanian car plants until August 19th. In the United States, 2 people in Michigan have died from an intestinal illness traced back to iceberg lettuce. Both had serious underlying conditions that the illness and dehydration may have worsened. Michigan has now logged more than 11,000 cases and 193 hospitalizations. The Food and Drug Administration has tied the outbreak to a Taylor Farms operation in central Mexico, but authorities are still hunting for other potential sources. U.S. pop star Ariana Grande will step out of public life once her tour wraps next month. A representative for the pop star told People magazine that her public-facing work has brought her, quote, endless ongoing public scrutiny. She has also pulled out of a Stephen Sondheim revival due to open at London Barbican Centre in 2027. Grande has 3 dates left in Chicago before a 10-night run at London's O2 Arena, where her tour ends on September 1st.
We are tracking a massive record-breaking heat wave pushing into the western regions today. In fact, a heat wave emergency warning, the very first of the year, will officially go into effect for the greater Seoul area at 11 a.m., as well as for Gwangju and Jeollanam-do province. In fact, Seoul had the hottest temperatures of the year so far yesterday, and readings will go even higher under that blazing sunshine. Meanwhile, there could be sudden showers in some of the western regions, which will not help much to ease the heat, but will increase the humidity. Keep an umbrella handy. And this afternoon, Seoul and Gwangju will be getting up to 38 degrees Celsius, but the eastern regions will have lower highs at 36 degrees in Daegu and 34 in Busan. This extreme heat will stick around for a while. Even the healthiest people can be at risk of heat-related illnesses. So please stay indoors during the hottest hours and drink plenty of water.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.